Hi, you welcome back. My name is Isaiah Phillips Akintola. This is the Porter's Gate online broadcast. You are listening to the Zadok Leadership School of Ministry. Just before we ran up for the first session this morning, we were discussing on the concept of the various levels of our spiritual maturity, our spiritual level of understanding, in dealing with the things of the Spirit. And I remember closing with 1 Corinthians chapter 13, 9 and 12, and Mark chapter 4. I'll just quickly go back to the scriptures again before we move into the next thing. This session has been very, very interesting in terms of laying a very solid spiritual perspective on how we engage the things of the Spirit vis-a-vis the prophetic and the various degrees that is expected, the various degrees of understanding that we find ourselves. All right, we grow based on our interaction with the things of the Spirit, and based on how we're able to, relate to that which the Spirit of the Lord, has offered us and has revealed to us. And therefore, you see, that the things of God, our understanding of the things of the Spirit are in various degrees, and each degree of knowledge basically reveals our standard of maturity. And that's why I said before, I went for break, that it's important that we understand where we are, and that some of the things that we're declaring right now maybe things that we are able to immediately resonate with, or things that we will find a bit challenging to understand, well, based on where we are spiritually, because where we are spiritually, all right, is a progression. Amen. That's how the things of God is. All right, there are progressions in spiritual maturity, spiritual understanding. All right, and each stage, sometimes the stage we find ourselves may look as if it's the best point that we're supposed to be. But when the time comes, I can bet you, when the time comes for God to bring us into the next season, into the next sphere, into the next concept of what He has ordained and desire us to know, He will begin to, roughen the nest that we find ourselves. He knows how to do that, and He will bring us out of that 30-fold, that 60-fold into the next reality. So Paul was saying here in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, 9 to 12, he says, "For we know in part, and we prophesy in part." And I think, to me, that is just very, very important, especially in the days where people just want to relate with you based on their concept of truth, based on the concept of knowledge. In fact, today you hardly see any, concept of relationship beyond just what we know. Everybody wants to prove a point that yes, they know this, and therefore you don't need to teach them. You don't need to explain to them. And I think, like I said some time ago, one of the reasons, that has led to this is because of how leadership in the church, in the body of Christ, has presented itself for a while now. We've seen a situation where those who are supposed to be spiritual fathers, leaders, gatekeepers, elders at the gates, have abused their position, their responsibility, their authority, if you will, all right, to take advantage of those who are looking up to them. So those who are actually looking up to the spiritually mature today are doing that with some level of rejection and distance. There's that distance today where people will allow you to come close to them to such a level. People don't really want true intimacy in terms of impartation. All right, and I'm emphasizing this because some of the things that we will come to realize, all right, in terms of knowledge, in terms of divine maturity, has to come through our connection, our contact. Yesterday I was talking about Elijah and Elisha. There was that close proximity all right, between both of them for there to be an impartation. All right. So the knowledge that we have, either based on what we have read, based on what we have studied, based on our ability to sit in a classroom or in a church to hear, to listen, and to receive certain information is good, but it's not good enough, particularly if you're going to be relating to the things of the Spirit vis-a-vis the prophetic. The prophetic requires that we have very close, intimate relationship. And of course, when I say intimate relationship, I'm looking at that from a very, positive point of view, that we have to, communicate. We have to, really get into contact with those whom the Lord has placed across our path. Right? We have to, trust. We have to believe. We have to submit, and they must not take advantage of our openness, of our trust. Unfortunately, that's what we are seeing. But I need to correct this, because we cannot say, and I say that's a problem we're having in the church, because of what has been done in perverting truth, in perverting principles, in perverting the values of God. You find people now going to the extreme end. So, okay, I'm not going to relate. I'm not going to connect. I'm not going to do what I'm supposed to do. And therefore, that also impacts negatively on you, because in the things that you're supposed to be receiving, in the things you're supposed to be knowing, all right, you're not getting those things because you build a wedge. All right, because of what somebody did or what somebody said or how somebody misrepresented the things of God. So we cannot say because there's a misrepresentation of the ways of God, of the principles of God, that those things are no longer valid. That those principles are no longer valid. That will be an error. I mean, these are the two errors we're seeing in the church, okay? Because men of God are lying, they're cheating, they are, taking advantage of, of people. So I'm going to just stay away. Staying away will not resolve the problem. You've got to find a community. You've got to find those. You've got to find the true men. You've got to, people had to go to, to the wilderness, to the backside of Jordan to look for, the authentic. They had to find a man there. And imagine in the days of John the Baptist, he was basically the only voice beyond the Pharisees and the Sadducees around. John the Baptist was the only voice, and for you to connect with John, you have to go to the backside of the wilderness. If you're going to hear something beyond just the average, beyond what you are listening to, beyond what you're being fed, all right, on the telecast, or on maybe in your church. If you want, an authentic voice, somebody who will really give, you have to believe God. You have to search. All right. Bible says if you search diligently with all your heart, you will find. So I'm saying this, you wonder why are you relating this to just, for we know in part, because there's no way we will be able to step into the full reality of the Spirit of God, be able to deal with the issues of understanding the framework and the footing of the prophetic, all right, if we're just willing to go halfway, if we're just willing to go 99.9, we have to be ready to go all the way. We've got to be ready to go all the way. We've got to be ready to trust. And if somebody disappoints you, well, so be it. Then you have to really believe God again to get someone who can truly, because listen, you can only look forward towards that which heaven has promised you and continue to press towards, that realm of perfection. If you have to be looking back every second, every minute of the day, if you have to be, suspecting every person that comes your way, you are not going to grow. You're not going to mature. I think God wants somebody to hear this. You are not going to come into the full reality of what God designed for your life. It is important that we realize that if there are issues in our life, if there are mistakes, if there are disappointments, there are things weighing us down, we've got to learn to shed off those weights, cast them down. I know it's not easy, because till today I'm dealing with some things that people have done, people have said, how people have misrepresented me, my call, my purpose, the vision of God for my life. All right, things that people have said against you, because because you're human. Yes, you're human, you're growing, you're developing, you're maturing. All right, and certain things takes time for them to actually fizzle out of your mind, out of your life. But But the reality is, when situations and circumstances calls to mind again, those bad experiences, that's what the memory does. The memory, calls those files and remind you, say, hey. So, but you have to be deliberate in your relationship with God. And this is very, very vital and important, to how we engage the things of the Spirit. That you cannot allow the bad experience of yesterday, or even the good experience of yesterday, to define and become, the factor that marks how you move into the future. You cannot allow that. The Bible says, forget the things that are behind you, pressing towards, amen, that reality that is before you. You've got to do that. If you don't do that, you will not be able to fully function in the capacity that heaven has given to you. And I think we have to really do that. So when Paul says, we know in part, and that you and I must come to believe that indeed we know in part. And that part, will come in various degrees, will come in various measures, will come in different realities. We know in part, and therefore, because we know in part, we prophesy in part. We prophesy in part. The knowledge we have, the knowledge we have, amen, will define, or will measure, amen, how we are able to operate in that concept of the prophetic. The knowledge we have will define, will benchmark, our prophetic ministry. It will benchmark it. So it's important that we realize that we need to continually seek, amen, for greater knowledge. And this knowledge is not just some acquired knowledge. This is a knowledge of experience, an experiential knowledge. And remember, we cannot also build our spiritual engagement based on just mere experience, because experience changes. You cannot say because of you had this thing, you saw this thing yesterday, the curtain was shaking yesterday at this point, so God is there. Or because, the Bible says he was not in the wind, he was not in the fire, he was in the still small voice. There was a time he moved in the wind, there was a time he moved in the fire. All right, those were relevant concepts of the move of God. But today he decides to be in the still small voice. So being able to continually journey with God and understanding, amen, that experiencing the things of the Spirit changes. What remains constant in the Spirit is truth and the values that holds the truth. They don't change. Truth don't change. And the values that holds the truth don't change. And in fact, the objective of truth don't change. But every other thing, are subject to change. So that's a good point. Let's continue. And then we went further again. Look at Mark chapter 26. It says that for the kingdom of God is like a man scattering his seed on the ground night and day, whether he sleeps or gets up. The seed sprouts and grows, whether he sleeps and gets up. So whatever you're doing in the natural, you've got to understand, that the principles of the kingdom will always take effect. All you need to do is do what you are supposed to do. Sow the seed and water it and go, leave it. You can't sow the seed and then, get a seat and sit there and you're watching. No, it's not going to work that way. You've got to allow, amen, yourself to go through the process of life. As you go through life, knowing that the seed of the kingdom, knowing that the principles and the values of God has been established in your life, then you need trust and faith and watch that thing grow. Watch it grow. Watch it develop. It's only a matter of time. The Bible says night and day, whether he sleeps or gets up, the seed sprouts and grows, though he does not know it. All by itself, the soil produced. Listen to this. That's a concept. That's a process of nature. And nature, amen, is subject to the principles of the kingdom, the principle of God, or the principle of the Spirit. Okay. Bible says, all by itself, the soil produce grain. First, the stalk. The stalk you cannot eat. The head you cannot eat. Amen. The head of the kernel you cannot eat, or you have to wait for a time that is called, amen, the ripening of the grain. The Bible says first the stalk, then the head, then the full kernel in the head. As soon as the grain is ripe, he puts in the sickle because the harvest has come. Now, this is a principle of our own spiritual development as it is in the natural, so it is in the spirit realm. All right. So I believe this point, once again, re-emphasize how we grow, how we relate and understand the things of the Spirit, all right, and how we connect to the spiritual. You got to understand that even the prophetic starts, amen, with a seed, start from that formation of a seed in us. Let me repeat what I've just said. The prophetic itself, amen, starts as a formation of a seed. You don't grow up one day to become, a prophet. Amen. Yes, you were born to become a prophet, but you go through the process of developing into one. Just like you don't grow one day to become an apostle. Amen. This is a gift. This is a grace. I can assure you that when God calls you, the Bible says before you were born, amen, I knew you. I called you and shaped you, amen, to become a prophet, to become, a vessel, a channel that, will represent the counsel of God. But you have to go through. You've got to go through the pathway. You've got to go through the channel. You've got to go through, amen, the schooling, if you will, of development, such that grace and giftings, amen, are better functional. Okay. So these are important principles that helps us to understand spiritual development vis-a-vis developing in the grace and the ministry of the prophetic. All right. So let's look at the next thing that I felt is important. Now, I've got 8 points here that I quickly want to share with you in terms of what qualified, this position, what gives me, if you will, the passion and the call, okay, to declare and to, speak on this subject of, the prophetic ministry, the prophetic office. What gives one, right, such a position of qualification? First, beyond the fact that, now let me read from my note, beyond the fact that I have spent close to 3 decades of my life in church pioneering and ministry service at various levels, and I've also been involved in various kingdom functions, all right, in terms of leadership training, development, and all that. All right. I believe that what gave me this grace or calling into this office, if you will, of an apostolic authority to stand, all right, and declare, okay, and proclaim this concept of, spiritual building in terms of, the prophetic ministry is based on the passion, based on the passion that I have to see the Church of Christ grow and develop and come into that, full position of manhood, if you will. All right. So this is something that I quickly really want to establish, because I think somebody out there may be wondering, so, but what gives you this authority to speak on this subject? So I believe that because I've got, a grace, an apostolic grace, a governmental office, all right, to speak as a legitimate, bona fide voice that represent, all right, the community of Christ, that represent the ecclesia, okay, is one. 2, another thing that I believe qualified me, all right, that qualified me, at this point, as, part of the gruesome, if you will, the gruesome, painful dealings, all right, of the strong hand of the Lord upon my life in shaping my spirit. Now, this is very important. Now, growing up, in life, in fact, when I began to grow up and began to realize, that God, is calling me. If I take you back to how, I gave my heart to the Lord, I grew up not really believing in the Lord, even though I grew up in a very religious atmosphere. Back then, while I was, a young boy, life was very difficult, painful, growing up back then. But yeah, so I never really, I got to a point where I made up my mind that I really don't believe in God again. I don't believe in the existence of God. Would I call myself an atheist? I'm not sure if that I will be qualified to be called one, but I basically live my life as one. I never believed in God, just did my own thing, because, you grew up in a very hostile, difficult environment, where, even the issue of, family became, more of a negative reality to me. And so that brought me to a conclusion of basically rejecting. But those were part of, I guess, the tools the Lord was using, all right, to prepare me. Because back then I had an opportunity to even, join the Muslim faith, growing up, as early as before 4 o'clock, before, the call, the Muslim call to prayer, you're already awake. You can listen. I mean, I know back then I know this call to prayer by heart. I could recite it just by the fact that I daily hear this, a call to prayer. And yes, but those were, I guess, looking back to those periods, I see that God really arranged, those settings in my life. It was painful. It was difficult, to understand or even process, but they were part of the things that the Lord used. You wake up so early in the morning and you have to get the house ready, you're more like the errand boy of the house. So that kind of, gave me a sense of, alertness, awakeness to, to do things, to be very, focused in terms of, putting things together. So yes, that's one aspect. It's like Joseph, you find yourself in a state where you are in prison. To me, those periods were like a season of being in prison, and you ask yourself, is there going to be a light at the end of the tunnel? Yes, there was, but if back there one never realized it. So then the third point, my rare exposure, all right, to spiritual resource. Obviously, I finally gave my heart to the Lord, came to the church, and learned so many things within the community of the church. Grew up in a very charismatic setup, right? You begin to learn so many things. The Lord began to expose me to ministries and materials. Right? Back then, in the late 80s, where I gave my life to Jesus Christ, somehow I guess that was a time in my life, because that was a season where there was the region that I grew up, in West Africa, was actually about to step into a season of transition from, the old religious concept to, the charismatic Pentecostal Lateran, community, where, a lot of energy, prayer, praise, worship, and things like that. So back then, people from different part of the world, where I had the opportunity to visit where we worship, where I was worshiping, and obviously coming with material. So I was exposed to more like the American, community of ministry that came to Africa vis-a-vis Nigeria. Okay, bringing materials of Kenneth Hagin, all these, people, guys of faith, the faith move. I listened to a lot of their material, a lot of prosperity message, a lot of missions, a lot of materials from Maurice Cerullo, Kenneth Hagin, Jerry Savelle, a lot of these guys. But within all that, somehow mysteriously, the Lord also began to introduce me to materials of people like what do you call it now, Watchman Nee, where I worship, materials of Watchman Nee was like, non-existence. So I had a balance, and it was from there, that my journey into the things of God. So while I'm listening and reading all this, materials from this Word of Faith brethren, which I love them passionately. I listen to a lot of tapes, back then. I've got stag of tapes. Talk about, back then. I invested in those materials, both worship and messages. But while I was listening to those messages and I was imbibing these principles and truth into my life, I'm also being introduced to materials of, somebody like Watchman Nee and some other guys that are very deep in the things of the Spirit. So somehow my spirit was feeding from two realms. Yes, one aspect that is telling me you can get all you can get. You need to have faith to possess all you can possess, which I need. Looking at my background, I had a very rough, terrible, background. Things were difficult and rough. So I needed the material that will help me to boost my faith, encourage me and tell me, yes. Beyond that, the Lord gave me an opportunity to be close to, to the leadership, to the degree that I became a personal assistant, to, the pastor who back then was one of the key, in fact, if he's not the main key charismatic guy, all right, at that period in time. So opportunity, was there for me to be exposed, all right, to a lot of material. He's got a big library, which, somehow when I go there to clean some of the books, I just look at this book and I read. And mind you, I grew up, dyslexic. It was difficult for me to even read. It was difficult for me to comprehend. But somehow, I guess the passion to want to know, to want to learn, kind of override, all right, my limitation, my handicaps, all right. Things that, one was told that one would never be able to do. I've surpassed all those things. So I had a passion, and I believe God placed that passion in me because of what he was preparing me for. I never knew what he was preparing me for, but I was, just taking all these materials in, on healing, deliverance, so many books, tapes, videos, you watch this man until the Lord began to bring materials of people like Mark Amby across my path. And I'm weighing these two things that I'm listening to. They seem to be worlds apart, yet somehow they made sense to me. So the Lord began to set me on a journey until a period came, I guess, by 1990 or thereabout, where I now began to, say to myself, now I think it's time to move on. I've had enough of, this charismatic thing. I didn't know what the Lord wants to do next, but I just knew that I needed to go to, a place where I can be trained, I can be built, I can be empowered, based on the things that I have read in some of these materials that have been, brought my way. And so that was where my journey began of spiritual rediscovery or spiritual renewal, if you will. And all that were laying powerful, spiritual, structure within me. Until I came back from my Bible school training, and I still discovered that there was more passion and burden. In fact, half of the things I learned in Bible school, I never really applied them to the church, because when we started the church, thank God for grace and gift, and the charismatic grace was there. So we're just moving by the Spirit of God. Until the time came where the Lord began to say, now it's time to move and shift to the next reality. And that was just the time where the apostolic wave, began to, flow into, the church, the mainstream church. Obviously, I was one of the first people to grab hold of it because I could relate to it. My spirit has been hungry and thirsty and yearning for this truth. And so it was easy for me to connect. So those are part of the things that the Lord used basically to lay a spiritual foundation for me. And the grace of God was actually available for me to shift, for me to, begin to step into this thing. Now, while I was in the charismatic church, there was a prophetess or prophet, if you will, that came with a team from America. And this woman gave me some of the most profound words I've ever heard in my life, and, prophesied into my life. And those words, stuck into my spirit. I knew what she was saying was just so right and accurate, even though I had no clue of how to fulfill or how to come into those realities. But, into those things that she was saying. But those words, glued on my spirit, glued in my heart, and I held, dear to those words until I began to, see those words unfold in my life. And I could remember what finally did it before I finally left, the church, to a Bible school, which I thought was the right thing to do back then. Was, I saw myself with my eyes open. That was the first, and I think that was the first and the only time I've ever, experienced what you call an open vision. I saw myself while praying in the church. I saw myself on the wall with a megaphone, preaching, declaring the word of God in a particular street. I still know and remember, all right, in Lagos, and I'm like, is this for real? I saw myself. It's like you're watching, a projector. You're watching a movie through a projector, and before I could call people and say, "Hey, can you see what I'm seeing?" The scene just, fizzled out, disappeared, and that was it. Beyond that, yes, the Lord now began to speak to me, okay, through an inner voice. You hear this inner voice, but the inner voice is an inner voice, but it's so loud and clear to the point like you're wondering who is speaking, but it's an inner voice. And God began to use people and send people to me. Look, God wants to use you. The Lord wants to use you. Finally responded. And so all this gave me a solid, spiritual foundation. When I went to Bible school, the passion never died, and I became, the what you called the prayer leader of, the school. In fact, I was a prayer leader and some other things. But yes, but I could see that the hand of the Lord was upon my life. Finish Bible school, having an opportunity to be ordained and maybe sent into ministry. And I could remember the Lord saying, you will not be ordained here. You will not allow anybody to lay hands on you. You will not allow anybody to, to touch you. All right, just get your certificate and leave. So in the day where, the Archbishop Benson Daosa, who is late now, was, ordaining certain people who are supposed to be the key guys during that period that they can maybe use for their ministry, Church of God Mission back then. I could remember the Lord saying to me, no, you're not gonna be part of this. Go back to Lagos. And that was it. And so now I'm sharing this testimony to, help you understand, what gave me that kind of validation, stability. In fact, back then, when the Lord said to me, go back to Lagos, he said to me, the person that will ordain you will come from, United Kingdom. And I'm in my own natural mind, I'm saying, who do I know from United Kingdom? I don't know nobody from United Kingdom, but I heard that so clear in my spirit. The person will come and will ordain you. And will ordain you into the prophetic ministry. Wow, that was strange to me. And so we continue until I think a few years later, as a brother who moved his family and ministry from United Kingdom, Pastor Paul Ogedengbe, who was, one of the key guys in the WBN back then. And he came and, the moment I saw him, I just knew that this is the man that God was talking about, that he was going to ordain me into, my prophetic ministry. And yes, he did. And so that is another, validation, if you will, how I know that I was called into the prophetic. And you see God actually move into in various directions of my life, showing and leading me. All right. Another point, that I will look at is, my seasons of pastoral work did expose me to, a multi-layered, complex characters and struggles within people that to a large degree expose my own even fear, insecurity, and failures, and even mistakes. All right. If you've been a pastor and you've pastored with all your heart, you will be exposed to your own, not just to people's mistake, but your own mistake, your own insecurity, your own fear, your own failures, and all that. But those are all part of, the process of the grooming of God. Okay, if you think everything is just going to go rosy, and then yes, you step into this thing. No, it doesn't work that way. All right, because as you deal with people, all kinds of things will begin to come out, all kinds of issues and challenges and struggles and misconceptions and misrepresentation. So, but those were part of the process, of the making of the man. All right, but beyond that, God's hand was so strong upon my life that that was the place where God began to emphasize the issues of restraint. Particularly when the Father began to move me away from the charismatic concept of ministry into the apostolic. So it's like bringing the demarcation. Certain things you can no longer do. Certain places you can no longer go. The way you used to present yourself, you can no longer be accepted. The way you used to present ministry can no longer. So there was a total, complete reorientation of my life, of my ministry, and what I stood for. The way I understood, amen, the things of God began to change. The way I related to God began to change. All right. So those were part of the things that the Lord used beyond my struggle, my sacrifice, all right, and the various dealings of God and the process of God in my life. Okay, so these things brought me to a place of beginning to understand that to some degree how we present God and how God has been presented to us has been indeed misrepresented. All right. So the Lord began to speak to me and deal with me and begin to, if you will, process me through his fire. All right. So let's look at point number 6. My passion and love for the ministry of the Holy Spirit is one aspect also that I believe, gave me, this grace and calling. I mean, I still do, but back then I had a passion, a longing to know the Holy Spirit. And it was from there that the Holy Spirit began to expand, began to show me, began to reveal to me what the ministry of the prophetic is, at least from Christ's perspective, not from what, people are saying, even not from some of the things I've read in the book, because I remember reading so many books about the prophetic, and just trying to understand. But I could remember the Holy Spirit begin to teach me. The prophetic is about Christ. It's about you becoming more like Christ. And therefore, I could remember when I finally stepped into ministry, it says, your phrase for ministry will be the revelation of Jesus Christ, that I may know him. So if you understand that and you put that as the foundation of your spiritual, disposition and engagement, you'll not go wrong. And that has been, all right, my focus ever since then. And so passion for the Holy Spirit, passion for Christ, passion for truth, passion for his word, passion for his presence, passion for the word of God are part of the things that define my calling, my ministry, into the prophetic. Yes, another concept that we can look at. In fact, the seventh concept is that I had opportunity to meet with some very key guys in the prophetic ministry, particularly in the mid 90s, early 2000, who to some degree, because like I said earlier on, that if we have relationship with people, and you really want to know, I could remember back then I had a relationship with some guys, people, both men and women, who were solid in the things of the Spirit. And just having contact and spending time with those people really robbed on me some of the grace, some of the insight, some of the, wisdom that one, could define as, as basic in developing spiritual, character. And I think to some degree, those were part of the things the Lord used, all right, to shape my spirit and give me, all right, the understanding of certain things. Yes. So having this relationship with, some key people, I believe that in the counsel of true relationship, there are transfers of spirit, there are impartations of values, there are impartations, of grace and ministries. So that is another thing. Lastly, I have sought to, all right, to know and to walk in the sevenfold character nature of the Spirit. Okay, I guess this is also part of 7, but I place this as 8. And lastly, the Father obviously felt, all right, that it's just, his will that I be called into the prophetic, and that beyond just operating in the prophetic, but that I'll also be able to teach. All right. Now, you must agree with me that this is a very difficult thing, because, growing up struggling to speak, it was a difficult thing. I mean, if you're struggling to speak, you're struggling to, to express yourself and to communicate, yet you've been called into ministry. You ask yourself, how are you going to do it? Now, that's where one begin to see, that this is actually, a miracle, is a calling, is a grace. It's something that one has been, set out to, to do in life. And so my limitation in the natural really does not stop, all right, what I've been called, because your call overrides every form of limitation. Now, at the struggle, yes. Were the challenges, yes. But I said those challenges and struggle were not, strong enough to stop me, to hinder me, all right. With the issue of, even writing. I've written so many materials, books, all right, today that have been a blessing, that has still been a blessing to a lot of people. Yet in the natural, these were things that, one will say you're not able to do, not able to speak, not able to write, not able to communicate properly. But these are things, I guess, the Spirit of the Lord has empowered me, all right, to do and to carry out. And I believe that if one really understand, that there is a dimension of grace, there is a dimension of, of release when the call of God comes upon your life, all right, that He enables you, He gives you that ability to do what He wants you to do, and to carry out whatever He will have you, carry out, on His behalf. And I think these are very good concept of, spiritual, foundation that can allow one to be able to step into, the grace and the giftings of the Spirit. So these are things that I believe, gave me, the strength. I mean, if you look at, for somebody who really know me and have been following me, you will understand that I'm very graced. I don't want to say gifted. I'm very graced in the area of expressing myself through writing, like I've said earlier on, through writing, okay? And obviously through digital writing. Because if you ask me to write, just with my pen and, paper, you might not be able to read what I'm writing, because somebody says, I speak in tongues when I'm writing. But the Father has given me the grace, but also given me the opportunity and the technology to be able to, do what I might not be able to do in the natural, all right, through technology. And therefore, I'm one who loves technology, my computer, my laptops and all that, things that enhances. And I believe these are part of what the Father, all right, has provided for His church, for society, all right, to do what they will not naturally be able to do. All right. So this is good. And it has given me, all right, that position of strength and advantage to be able to express, all right, not just myself, but the mind of God. Because you see, whatever God is doing in your spirit. But that which He's done in your spirit, yes, will have to be expressed out, okay? And sometimes when you really want to express, that which you know in you, you may find limitation. But if you will find, the grace and the tools that have been made available for divine expression, then use them. I could remember, back then in the when I just finished Bible school, and somebody wanted to help me to go to learn computer, and I basically rejected it. I said, no, I'm not going to learn this thing that is going to destroy, that the devil is going to use, the Antichrist is going to use to destroy the world. I mean, that was how knowledgeable I was back then with regards to, all right, technology. But just about, 2 years later, the Lord shifted my understanding. And I said, hey, this is supposed to be enhancing your life. And since then, I've been investing hugely, on technology, on, things that can enhance my life and enhance the life of other people. And that's why, at the time when the Lord gave me the financial resource, we opened, an IT center, all right, bought about 18 computers they're about to train, to empower people, but not just Christians, even people in the community, in the society, both Christians and Muslim, all right? Because I saw that, I saw the grace, and I saw, all right, the advantage in technology, because it has helped me. So I believe that if we understand, that God, the Father, wants to train us and build us and empower us to represent Him and to, carry out His will, then we'll invest our time and invest our resource in that. So I've shared all this thing to say these are part of the frameworks that gave me the platform to be able to stand today and proclaim and declare this truth and declare this message to you in terms of, dealing with the prophetic ministry. Remember, like I said, that the prophetic is not just one aspect. It's not just one area of your life, all right? It's not just the ability to speak and give words and prophesy. It's not just the ability to see things no. It's an entire structure of existence. And as we go on, I'm going to share more on that, all right? Because when we say prophetic, you're dealing with every aspect of your life, of your being, all right? Both the good, the bad, and the ugly. Every aspect, God uses things in our life, even things that we don't think are relevant, things we never will relate, the dealings of God to, are part of what God uses to shape, to build your intentions, your ideas, your creativity, your belief system. Every aspect of your being are all part of the formation, are all part of the build up, are all part of the instrumentation that heaven uses, to build you up, to fashion you, your philosophy, your exposure, your upbringing, your environment. They are all part of, the dealings of God. Your marriage, your children, the challenges of your life. There is no single area of your life that has no prophetic signal. Every aspect. Now, these are not things I read in a book. These are things I came up to, came up to understand. I came to understand as part of the training, part of the dealings of God. I mean, things that you've gone through in life and you will feel, this has no meaning. Then suddenly they bring a clarity through prophetic understanding. And then you begin to have, perspective into why, into the reason. And then that brings peace and you embrace it. And sometimes that makes you feel inadequate. Oh my word. That makes you feel inadequate. It makes you feel weak. But it's in that weakness that the strength of God is perfected. It's in that weakness that the strength of God is perfected. So God will bring you through situations, through people, through circumstance, to break you, all right? To mold you, all right? And to shape you into what He wants you to become. And if He's done with that, then it transforms you again into whatever He wants you to represent. So it's a continual life of transformation and journey and development until that perfect day comes. Remember, the scripture says the path of the righteous man, all right, is like the breaking of the day. You're walking through, certain path, and the more you walk, the more you see, the light. The more you understand the ways and the wills of God and the counsel of God, the more you understand the demand of God, the more you understand why you went through certain things. Some of us are going through certain things right now that we don't know why we're going through them. But if you would just wait and hold on and allow the Spirit of God, to take you through that path and trust and allow Him, suddenly you begin to realize in the future that understanding is coming. Now, these are things I have learned. So if we know this, then we have a solid spiritual footing and a solid spiritual foundation to engage that which is before us. All right, I will stop here because now we are about to enter session 1 of the training. Isn't amazing? So all that we've been dealing with since we started this training is basically laying a foundation and an orientation. You can see that I'm a good teacher. I take the time to lay foundation and give you a solid, perspective with regards to what God is saying, how he wants us to relate. You see, because once we have an understanding of how God relates, of how God communicates, of how God will have us understand things, then it's easy for us to, to be fixative on what he's saying. It's easy for us to embrace what he's demanding from us. But if our understanding is not there, if we don't have a clear orientation, then it's difficult. And I'm sure if we'll maybe have the time to deal with the issues of discipleship, you will better understand. In fact, if I'd done discipleship before going into this training, maybe you better even understand what I'm trying to say. But I believe that we've given enough a spiritual introduction and understanding, the laying foundation of these principles. All right. So we're going to be dealing with the philosophy of spiritual training. We're going to be dealing with the philosophy of spiritual training. But yes, but before we do that, and that's going to be the first session of this training, we're going to be dealing with the philosophy. But before we do that, we're going to take a break and then we're going to come back. Thank you so very much. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.